Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Mama Kay coming at you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And today I have somebody who virtually lives about a 2-minute walk from me, and yet I cannot go and visit her. This is very infuriating during this time, but I'm so happy that she's decided to give us a little bit of her time this morning. So special guest, who are you?
My name is DJ Oakes Munro, and I do just live up the road from Joanne. And every time I'm out for a walk, when I see a dog, it's like, oh, is that Norman? Is that Norman? But I teach grades 6 to 8 band at HC Avery Middle School in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I've been there since 2002.
How long have you been teaching band?
Okay, my first band teaching job was in September of 1983 in a little town just outside of Edmonton, Alberta. So I think that makes 37 years.
That's incredible. So what has your teaching journey been then? If that's where you started, how in the world did you end up in Winnipeg?
Well, I taught in the Edmonton area for about 3 years. And then I had a year, well, no, sorry, I had a year off in the middle of that. But the school, the last year that I was there, I was teaching in a private school, and it closed unexpectedly at the end of the school year. So there weren't, the jobs in the immediate area were all taken. And I had signed up for a summer course in elementary education because I was taking on more elementary at that time, and I was no good at it. I had gone through university saying, I'm going to be a high school band teacher. I don't need to know any of this. Big mistake. So I had signed up for this summer course, and I was asking all the people at the summer course, where do you teach? Are there any jobs where you are? Who do I talk to? And one of the women said, well, I just left my position in Northern Labrador, and I don't think they've filled it yet. Why don't you call this guy in Goose Bay? So I phoned Goose Bay, and I talked to this fellow, and in the middle of August, I was hired to teach in a little town called Nain in Northern Labrador. It was the last 12-month-a-year inhabited settlement on the Labrador coast. And I taught there for 3 years. It was the best thing that could have happened to me. You can see some of the artwork behind me over here, this print, and there's a carving over there. There's carvings all over the house because the two carver families, you'd be sitting there on a Thursday night watching CBC because that was the only TV we ever got. And there'd be a knock at the door. You want by carving this? And so we have a whole ton of Inuit art in our house as a result of all that. But I could go on for the entire interview talking about that experience of teaching in Labrador. So I taught there for 3 years, and during that time I married my husband Peter, and we were considering starting a family, and that was the main reason that we left, just because it being a fly-in community, healthcare was a little sketchy, especially if the weather was bad, and we didn't want to take a chance. Friends of ours had a difficult pregnancy, and she had wound up having to spend a good portion of her pregnancy away from her family for that reason. So then we got on the horn and started looking for places that would interview us over the phone again, because it was a 2-day journey by plane really to get to any place big, because there'd be 1 day to get to Goose Bay and 1 day to get to wherever else. So I was interviewed by the Swan Valley School Division, and they hired me on to teach middle school band there, and I taught there for 11 years before moving to Winnipeg. So that's the story.
What school were you at there?
École Swan River South School, which was a dual track like yours, K to 8, French immersion, 6 to 8, English stream.
So did you teach English band there, or were you also doing the elementary?
I did a tiny bit of elementary during part of that time because band started in 7. So I taught, it was actually a junior high before it became a middle school. So I was teaching 7, 8, 9 band. And then when they added the 6s, there was a stretch of time where I taught the grade 6 classroom music for the French. I taught it in English. I don't have the French skills for that. Although if you want a funny French immersion school story, because I taught grade 9 at the high school, they always had trouble figuring out my supervision schedule. So they would put me on the same supervision post all year long so that they wouldn't mix it up and put me on supervision at a time when I was at the high school.
So when you came to Winnipeg, where did you go?
I was at Avery right away. I also was half-time at Elwick School, which is, you know, sort of a 3-minute, 5-minute car ride from Avery, and it's a K to 8. And so I was half-time.
I totally interrupted you in the middle of your story. You took a pause and then I jumped in.
Okay, let me finish the story because it'll make everybody laugh. So my supervision spot was with the K to 6 French immersion kids first thing in the morning. So I thought, well, I'll be a good Canadian and I'll learn to say some supervision-y type things in French. So one of the things that I thought I had learned was take your boots off at the carpet. And so I was happily saying what I thought was take your boots off at the carpet to the kids for, I don't know, a week before I noticed the French immersion teachers going. Turned out that I'd been telling them to, take their boxes off in the carpet. No, lift their boxes. Levez les boîtes dans le tapis. Lift your boxes in the carpet. Anyway, okay, back to real stuff. No, whatever.
So your first gig in Winnipeg was at Avery.
Yeah, I was at Avery and Elwick every second day.
And that has been your position ever since?
Well, no, I was at Elwick for 7 years. And then the full-time teacher at Avery retired, and I took over the full-time position there.
That's amazing. So how did you come about even wanting to be a band teacher? What was your journey from little DJ to when you started teaching? How did that all go?
Oh, golly. Little tiny DJ wanted to be a doctor. And then little DJ grew up old enough to be in health class, and all the blood started running to my feet, and I thought I better pick a different career path. So I think I was very shy, and I was a little brainiac kid and awkward, socially awkward. And so school and classrooms and learning felt very comfortable to me, and I think that's why I sort of looked at teaching. And I loved the band room. That was completely my safe space. I wasn't getting a huge amount of encouragement from my band teacher at the time. In fact, he was discouraging me from it. Still to this day, not sure why. But, you know, I couldn't imagine life without band. Life without the music room. It was a really tough slug getting to be comfortable in front of people and telling them what they should do. But that was the journey.
And what's your main instrument, or what did you start with?
In band, I started with flute, but not right away because this is a sad story. Okay. Sorry, folks. I was a bully victim in elementary school, and really struggling. I was one of those kids people have meetings about. But in grade 4, I really connected with my homeroom teacher, Mrs. Willis, and she had an after-school violin club. So at the end of grade 4, I joined the after-school violin club so that I could stay connected with her. And she was the one that saw the music spark in me. And so when I went to well, it was junior high then. When I went to junior high and Mr. Bowman said, "What are you going to play?" And I said, "Well, can I play violin?" So he dug up a violin for me, and I played violin till about midway through my first year, a little more than midway through my first year. And then he was making noises about starting a marching band. And I thought, well, they don't have violins in marching band. I better pick something else. So I went and asked him what he wanted me to play. And he said, well, what do you want to play? And I hadn't given it any thought, but I knew that my cousin in Ottawa played flute in a band, and they'd gotten to play for the Queen, and that sounded pretty cool to me. So I said flute, and he reached behind him on the shelf and he pulled out a flute and opened it up, and there was this beautiful silver. It was like a piece of jewelry on the green velvet case. It was a terrible flute, but I thought it was so wonderful. And he handed me the flute, and he handed me a book and said, the practice room's that way. And that was how I wound up playing flute. So I played flute right through university, picked up clarinet in high school when I knew that that was what I wanted to continue with. Tried to pick up saxophone in high school, but the saxophone that my parents had bought out of a fire sale from the Lions Club band, we found out years later, really didn't work. So never did learn to play saxophone all that well, but played flute, did all my training on flute, and then maybe 25 years ago, 20 years ago, I bought a trombone in a yard sale. And at that time, Swan River had compulsory grade 7 band, so everybody had to be in band, but we had a lot of families, of course, that couldn't afford instruments. So we were doing everything under the sun to make sure that these kids had an instrument that was at least somewhat appropriate. So if I saw, excuse me, hang on just a second. If I saw an instrument in a yard sale, I would pick it up. So I picked up the trombone, brought it home, used it at school for a while. One of the other teachers started a community band, and I said, well, I'll just play whatever you want me to play, wherever there's a hole. And the first year I played clarinet because we had no clarinets. And the second year I switched over to trombone, and all of a sudden I discovered how much I loved playing trombone. So there aren't too many things in my life that I regret, but I sort of wish I could go back to Mr. Bowman's office back there in 1975 and say, I want to play the trombone, Mr. Bowman. But anyway, my life has led me to wonderful music in all sorts of different ways, and now mostly what I play is trombone.
And it's funny because I think the first time I met you, it was seeing you playing trombone, and in my head that's always been there. And even though I know that you're a flute player by training, you're trombone in my head somehow. You know, I know we have the flute kinship, but yeah, and it's interesting too. As a flute player, I find trombone is the most comfortable for me besides flute. Something about it feels just right.
What I love, one of the things that I love about it is the physicality of it. It's very dancey when you're playing and you're in flow and your whole body is moving. And the other thing that makes sense to me, because it's how I sing and function, I like being down in the harmony. I like being in the middle of all the stuff that's going on, and flutes just kind of sit up there on the top of it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. It's a whole different set of listening you need, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
So you've already given us one of your funny stories, but you personally performing, do you have any weird and or strange stories you want to share with us about the weirdest or most fun gig that you've ever played? And remember, of course, it's a family show.
I was trying to think of that, and I mean, there's lots of weird ones. The marching band that I was in high school, our school didn't ever, well, they did have a marching band, but it was after I left. But I was in the Calgary Stampede band, and in 1975 they played the Grey Cup in Calgary, and it was so cold. And so we played the parade that year, and it was close to -40, I think.
And you were on flute for that?
And I was on flute for that. They gave us special permission to wear hand coverings, although we had to cut holes for our fingers. Well, I had to cut holes for my fingers because I was playing an open hole flute. But the really funny thing that happened in parades, our the baton twirler, can't think of the name, drum major. The drum major would always give us a break before we were coming up to the judging stand so that everybody's chops would be rested and we would play our best as we passed the judging stand. Well, when it's -40 and you stop playing your instrument for very long, it freezes solid. So when she gave us the signal to start to play, of course, very few people's instruments were working at all.
That's wild.
And
All the condensation would have just seized everything up.
yeah, exactly. The worst thing that happened in that parade, though, was that one of the trumpet players' lips actually froze to his mouthpiece. So if
Oh
you think about, licking a flagpole or some such thing, when he brought his trumpet down, it tore a piece of his lip off with it.
Oh my goodness. That's right there is why we don't have marching bands in Winnipeg.
You got it.
Oh my goodness. So other than having a plastic mouthpiece if they're in marching band in cold weather, do you have any advice for students who might be watching this and thinking about going into music as a career?
I do. I thought about this one for a long time, and I think I have two pieces of advice. One is to listen to everything and really cultivate and sharpen your listening skills, not just in a broad way, but in a really narrow way. If you're listening to a piece of music, whether a piece of music for the first time or a piece of music that you love dearly, listen down into it. What is the drummer doing? What is that second trombone player doing? What is the rhythm guitar player doing? How are the dynamics changing? What's the orchestration? What do the lyrics really mean? How are the lyrics affecting the music? How are the music affecting the lyrics? Listen deeply as much as you can in whatever genre it is. Sharpen your ears all the time and sharpen your musical imagination. So that can be in a creative standpoint of writing music. Not everybody feels super comfortable or super happy composing a piece of music. But if you're not composing, experiment with improvising, and that doesn't have to be jazz. Bach was a notoriously great improviser. Mozart was a notoriously great improviser. Chopin was a notoriously great improviser. But even with music that is already composed, where you have this piece of art that you are recreating through your instrument or through your voice or through your ensemble, engage your musical creativity, engage that creative, emotional, soulful part of yourself at every moment in your playing. When I've spoken to former students who have gone on to be performers, and performers, we are so hard on ourselves. We are such perfectionists, and we need to be. You absolutely have to remove every barrier in your technique to communicating with your audience, and that means being ruthlessly perfectionist with yourself, but never lose sight of the fact that it is communication, that your creative, living human soul is going to speak through this music to that creative, human, living soul over there.
That's beautiful. I love that. Now I have a list of things I want to listen to this afternoon and listen to it differently. Sometimes we forget, right? We just let it sort of wash behind us, or without really actually sitting and listening. And even if it's, like you said, it's something that you listened to a million times before, but how have you been listening to it, right? And whether it's listening to Led Zeppelin or listening to Debussy, it's listen to it with different ears.
And I think that's what makes the great music great, or part of what makes the great music great is that you can keep coming back to it.
Absolutely. I know for me, when Neil Peart died, I started listening to Rush in a different way. And I always knew that he was a phenomenal drummer, but just the finesse and the dancing that he put into his playing. I hate the fact that it took his passing for me to realize that. So I'm hoping that I will remember to listen to artists who are still living the same way.
Amen and amen.
So do you have any extra little bits of worldly DJ wisdom to pass along? Even if it's non-musical, we're in crazy times right now. And
Oh my gosh.
any last little tidbits to share?
Oh golly. One thing I think that I learned from the amazing Bill Christensen, and if you can get him to shush already, I know I have another sectional coming up.
The beauty of the real world, DJ.
The beauty of the real world, not my phone. Seek to understand before being understood was just something that he spoke of so often, and that he lives, and that I try to live, to take that little breath and that little moment and think, where is this person coming from, and how are they understanding this, and what's important to them in their lives, before I put my crown on and tell them how things should be according to my world.
It's hard, right, to remember to do that momentary pause and reflect. Because so much what we do as teachers is it has to be an immediate response. We have to be in the moment. Just it's a quick, you're making a million decisions all the time, but to actually take remember the human side.
Absolutely, for sure. And remember the real side. You just said it a minute ago, the beauty of the real world. Go walk barefoot, go touch a tree. I just stood out on my walk yesterday with my hand on a tree for, I don't know, 3 minutes, sort of soaking that in. That's real, and that's important, and that matters. Your friends, your family, your pets, your living environment, all your relations.
DJ, what beautiful words to leave our interview with. Thank you so much for taking some real special time this morning to share those with me.
It was my pleasure and my honor. You are such an inspiring teacher, and I'm so glad that you're becoming my friend.
DJ, so much love and hugs to you.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.